What's up, guys, and welcome back to Will Sports Talk. And this is part 2 of breaking down the 5 teams that I think actually have a chance to kind of over-exceed expectations and maybe make a run for the playoff next year. And in this video, we're going to talk about Texas. Texas, they went 8-5 last year. They ended up losing to Washington 27-20 in the Alamo Bowl. And it's important to note that I mentioned Texas lost 5 times last year, and all 5 of those losses were by 1 possession. So all 5 of those losses last year came by 7 points or fewer. So if you think about it, Texas was right there last year. So if they can somehow find a way to punch their ticket and get it done this year, I think they'll have a real shot this year. And honestly, I think this is the team to do it this year. Texas, they returned 15 of their starters. That is 9 on the offense and 6 on the defense. Most importantly, Texas fans should be happy they returned their starter from last year at quarterback, Quinn Ewers, who last year passed for 2,177 yards, 15 touchdowns, and 6 interceptions. He was playing really well up until he got injured. So hopefully he can stay healthy this year and hopefully have a good season for Texas. But they are kind of taking a hit in the running back room. They have Bijan Robinson and Rashawn Johnson. They left to go to the NFL. But they are bringing back some depth at running back. They're returning Jonathan Brooks and then Keelan Robinson. And it's important to note that Keelan Robinson actually transferred to Texas from Alabama in 2020. So I'm expecting more than likely a rotation there at running back. Kind of give him that 1-2 punch there. But on the offensive side of the ball, Texas, it's important to note that they're also returning their whole offensive line from last year. So all 5 starters from the line are returning to help Quinn Ewers and that running back duo. So I would expect that offense to be pretty productive next year. Going on to the defensive side of the ball for Texas. Texas, I expect their defense to be at the top half of the Big 12 this year. They're actually returning the most experienced and intelligent defense in the Big 12, and by most people, it's expected to be championship caliber. And by the way, that defense that's returning this year, last year wasn't too bad. They only gave up 21.2 points per game, which was ranked 3rd in the Big 12. So, like I said, they're expected to be pretty good on that side of the ball. Texas, they also, this coming up year, have the 3rd ranked recruiting class in the country. And that includes 4 5-stars and 14 4-stars. And out of those 5 stars, one of them is quarterback Arch Manning, who was actually the number one rated player in the country at the time. So, which Steve Sarkisian, he's already named Quinn Ewers the starter, but for now anyway. But I do expect Arch Manning to definitely compete for the backup. And I would not be surprised if towards the end of the season that he was actually competing for the starting job. So I expect him to be pretty good for Texas once he steps into that role. But just looking at Texas' schedule for this coming up year, I mean, they start off the season with Rice. That's obviously a win. And then they go right into week 2 playing at Alabama. Now, this is a tricky one for me because Alabama went to Texas last year and Texas about pulled the upset. I mentioned in my last video when I was breaking down the West that Texas was actually an injury away from beating Alabama last year. If Quinn Ewers never gets hurt in that game last year, Texas wins that game. So maybe Quinn Ewers can stay healthy through that game. And if he stays healthy, it could be a battle in Tuscaloosa. Now, just because this game's in Tuscaloosa, I will give Alabama the edge there. This year, if it was in Austin, I would definitely be taking Texas. But since this game is in Tuscaloosa, I'm going to give Alabama the edge. But I would not be surprised if Texas pulled this off. And then they go to Wyoming. I expect that to be a pretty big win. They go to Baylor. I expect this game to be pretty close throughout. I could see Texas pulling it out late, but I do expect them to win that game. Then Kansas comes to Texas. Kansas very much improved from years past. They actually had a very good season last year. Their quarterback, Jalen Daniels, looked really good. And one thing about Kansas, they actually returned the most starting production in the country. So this game could actually be a pretty tight game. But in the end, I do expect Texas to pull it out. And then we have the Red River rivalry against Oklahoma. And this is where, if they don't drop this game to Alabama, this is where I actually see Texas taking their first loss. And this game could really go either way. As the season progressed last year, Oklahoma did get better. Dylan Gabriel, I expect him to be very good for Oklahoma next year. This game could maybe go either way, but I expect Oklahoma to take it this year. Then they go into an off week. Then coming off the off week, they have to travel to Houston. And for those of you who don't know, Houston, they were actually in the AAC last year. And because of this whole conference alignment, this is their first year in the Big 12. So, but I actually see Texas pulling that one off as well. And then they go to Kansas Kansas State comes to them. And this game, you know, Kansas State, they lost Deuce Vaughn, their star running back. He got drafted to the Dallas Cowboys, I believe. And they're also losing their quarterback. They're losing some pieces on the defensive side of the ball. I expect Texas to pull this one out. And then they go to TCU. TCU's losing a lot of pieces next year. I don't see them being championship contender like they were this year. They're losing Max Duggan, their Heisman finalist quarterback, from last year. They're losing 2 leading rushers from last year, and then 3 leading receivers from last year. And they're also losing 3 starting offensive linemen. So TCU's losing a lot of key pieces there. And because of that, I actually have Texas taking this game. Then they go to Iowa State. And this is another one that I could see Texas dropping. Just because I like Iowa State's defense. Their defense should be pretty good next year. So I expect this to be kind of a low-scoring game. Even though in the Big 12 that's not very common. But I do kind of expect kind of a low-scoring game here. And I would not be surprised if Iowa State pulled this off. And then Texas Tech comes to Texas. And I expect Texas to win this game by probably 10 points to 2 touchdowns. So, at the end of the season, I can see Texas finishing anywhere from 9-3 to 11-1. But really, to me, like I said, it all depends on week 2, what happens in that Bama game. If they pull that off, watch out. Because then they will be riding momentum throughout the season. But, like I said, Texas, I see them going anywhere from 9-3 to 11-1. And maybe making the playoff. Join me next week in my next video, where we will do part 3 of breaking down the 5 teams that I think have a shot to make a run and maybe make the playoff. I will see y'all in my next video.